I'm Kevin, just your average man from the quiet town of Kirkwood, Pennsylvania. I've always been a bit of a loner, preferring the company of nature to that of people. One day, while exploring an unfamiliar trail, I discovered an old, run-down cabin concealed within the depths of the woods. The tall trees masked it from the world, their looming shadows casting an ominous veil over it, drawn by curiosity. I moved closer. I noticed peculiar symbols carved into the wooden door, like echoes of ancient rituals and unspeakable horrors. The wind picked up abruptly, its eerie howl piercing the silence. The door groaned open on its own accord, revealing the murky interior. I should have turned back, but my curiosity got the better of me. Stepping inside the cabin, I was met with a putrid smell of decay. The air was thick, filled with a dreadful unease. Against one wall, I spotted an altar stained with dried blood, candles flickering dimly, and a large, repulsive statue of an unknown entity. Its eyes seemed almost sentient, drilling into me with a sinister intensity. Intricate circles and symbols, traced in dried blood, adorned the ground around the statue. I didn't understand their dark meaning. As I stepped into one of the circles, trying to make sense of it all, a shiver ran down my spine. I felt watched, as if an ancient, malevolent entity was observing me from the darkness. A sudden, bone-chilling roar filled the cabin, making the candles around the altar blaze brighter. Dancing shadows unveiled a grotesque display of past horrors on the cabin walls. Then, figures began to materialize from the darkness, dressed in dark robes with unnerving, demonic masks. They were the cult of the unseen veil. Their movements were eerily coordinated, forming a circle around me. A tall figure, adorned with a crown of horns, advanced, pointing a gnarled finger at me while uttering something in a language foreign to me. An oppressive darkness fell. The air turned icy cold, and I felt a burning pain in my chest, forcing me to my knees. The cultists began to chant, their voices a terrifying harmony that echoed through the cabin. The eyes of the statue glowed ominously, and the room pulsed with a powerful energy. I felt an indescribable pull from my chest, like my soul was being tugged from my body. Terrified, I found the strength to break free from their circle, dashing out of the cabin and into the woods. I didn't stop until I was out of the forest, panting heavily and in immense pain. After that night, I was a changed man. I left Kirkwood behind, seeking refuge in the anonymous crowds of the city. But each night, the demonic cult invades my dreams, reminding me of the terrifying encounter. I awakened to the same chest pain, the remnants of their chant lingering in my mind. The cabin remains in the woods, its terrifying secrets intact, awaiting the next unwary soul. The cult of the unseen veil carries on, serving their ancient demonic deity, hidden in the depths of the Kirkwood forest. First, you should know that I'm a 16-year-old who, by circumstance or curiosity, has tangled with the realm of spirits more times than I'd like to admit. The most chilling of these encounters happened when I was barely a decade old, a spine-tingling incident that, even now, sends shivers down my spine and has been the cause of many sleepless nights. The night of my friend's birthday party, when I was 10, remains vivid in my memory. Each disturbing detail etched into my mind. His house was located on the outskirts of town, abutting a sprawling centuries-old forest, notorious in local folklore for being the dwelling of unseen entities. Despite the foreboding rumors, we decided to take advantage of the eerie ambience for our nighttime game of hide and seek. The setting sun gave way to the darkness, the dense woods casting long, ominous shadows around us. Our innocent excitement turned into anxious apprehension as some of the kids began swapping horror stories, embellishing tales of ghostly apparitions and unexplained happenings in the woods. It was as if they were feeding the fear already lingering in the chilly air, and we became increasingly reluctant to venture into the dark. The daunting task of being, it fell on me. I counted to 60, my heart pounding with every number. My youthful bravery, or perhaps foolishness, prompted me to venture towards the woods first. As I approached the gnarled trees, my every sense was heightened, my heart hammering in my chest as my eyes scanned the dark underbrush. That's when I saw it. A spectral light, shimmering and hovering above the forest floor, emerged from the depth of the woods. It appeared to have a human-like form, but was graced with ethereal wings that fluttered softly. The figure radiated a cold, unnatural light in the enveloping darkness, its glow making my skin crawl. It didn't make a sound, nor did it move towards me. It simply hovered, exuding an uncanny presence, before vanishing without a trace. I raced back, my blood running cold, asking my friends if any of them had witnessed the haunting apparition. But none had been near the woods, and I was left with my chilling encounter and their skeptical looks. To this day, that spectral figure haunts my thoughts, and the question of its identity remains unanswered. If anyone has encountered something similar or has any notion of what it could have been, I'm all ears. But until then, the specter remains a mystery, my childhood enigma that refuses to fade into oblivion. In the desolate heart of Louisiana, where a dirt road led to nowhere, I spent my childhood at the tender age of 11 or 12. A cluster of houses surrounded me, and among them were friends of my own age, with whom I roamed the woods, filled with youthful curiosity. One fateful day, our restless exploration led us to stumble upon a trail, so obscure that it seemed like nature itself was trying to hide it, despite an old wooden sign at its end, hastily painted with the warning, "Do not enter." Our childish defiance spurred us forward into the unknown. The trail unwound into a vast field, and at its center lay an eerie oasis of ancient trees, beckoning us deeper into their enigmatic embrace. Beyond the oasis, an opening in the trees tempted us further, and a chilling wind seemed to whisper haunting secrets into our ears. Undeterred by the unsettling atmosphere, we pushed on, eager to quench our thirst for adventure. As we passed through the opening in the trees, a profound sense of unease washed over us, and the once bright daylight dimmed, plunging us into an eerie twilight. The field before us stretched impossibly vast, as if it defied the laws of reality. At the far end of the field stood a tall, imposing figure, emanating an aura of malevolence. His presence was that of a specter, frozen in time, and his dark eyes fixated on us with a hunger for something beyond comprehension. Fear wrapped its icy fingers around our hearts, rendering us immobile in the face of the haunting figure. He stood motionless, draped in a long, decaying white robe that bore stains of an ominous darkness, oozing like spilled ink. His long, black, tangled hair hung like a curtain of shadows, shrouding his face in darkness, leaving only his ghastly, penetrating gaze exposed. The air grew heavier, and a deep, primal dread filled our souls, warning us of an impending malevolence that lurked within this peculiar realm. Unable to endure the sinister presence any longer, one of my friends broke free from the paralyzing grip of fear, urgently whispering, "Let's run. I don't like this at all." Without hesitation, we turned as one and fled, leaving the malevolent man behind, or so we thought. Yet, to our dismay, the familiar oasis of trees that had greeted us at the beginning of our journey had vanished without a trace. The once vibrant field now appeared barren and lifeless, as if the seasons themselves had withered and died. Confused and disoriented, we pushed forward in search of the trail's entrance, but it was as if the very fabric of reality had shifted around us. Reaching the end of the field, we encountered an inexplicable sight, an ominous river that had no place in our world. Panic surged within us as we realized that we had unknowingly crossed over into a realm beyond understanding. On the opposite bank of the river stood another field, an eerie mirror image of the one we had left behind, complete with its own dark oasis of trees. A bone-chilling revelation struck us. We had never truly crossed the river. Somehow, we were trapped within a haunting loop, condemned to repeat our nightmarish journey over and over again. As we watched in horror, the tall figure emerged from the distant oasis of trees on the other side, his slow, deliberate pace tormenting us from afar. Driven by terror, we turned and fled once more, our frantic steps echoing in the unnatural silence that clung to the air. For a third time, we rushed back through the opening in the trees, only to find ourselves back at the very beginning, as if we had unknowingly stepped through a sinister portal, leading to an inescapable abyss. Utterly petrified and disoriented, we ran with every ounce of strength we had left, desperately seeking the trail's entrance as if our lives depended on it. Finally, as we arrived back at the old wooden sign that warned against entry, we halted to catch our breath. But when I dared to glance back, the man was there, once again, mere feet away, his piercing gaze solely fixed upon me. Darkness engulfed his eyes, consuming all light and hope, and an incomprehensible dread overwhelmed my senses. He opened his mouth, and though he uttered no sound, I could feel his malevolence resonating through the very core of my being. Without hesitating, I turned and ran, leaving my bewildered friends in my wake. Desperate to escape the clutches of this sinister specter, drenched in fear and confusion, I ran all the way home, vowing never to return to that accursed place. We called it the Forbidden Area, and it became an unspoken agreement among us, never to mention it again. The memory of that haunting figure, with his abyssal gaze forever etched in my mind, continues to haunt my dreams even to this day. My childhood terror, though buried deep in the past, remains as vivid as ever, a constant reminder of the otherworldly horrors that lurk just beyond the veil of our reality. I've been planning this camping trip with David for months. We've been friends since childhood, and we love spending time together in the great outdoors. We've both been looking forward to this trip for a long time. We arrived at Gifford Pinchot National Forest early in the morning. The forest was beautiful, with towering trees and a thick canopy of leaves. We found a spot to set up our campsite and quickly got to work. After we had finished setting up camp, we decided to go for a hike. We followed a trail that led us deeper into the forest. The trees grew taller, and the forest became darker as we walked. We were enjoying our hike and talking about our lives when I heard a noise. It sounded like someone was following us. I stopped and listened, but I couldn't hear anything else. I decided to keep walking, but I was a little bit uneasy. I kept looking over my shoulders, but I couldn't see anything. After a while, we came to a clearing. In the middle of the clearing was a small cabin. The cabin looked abandoned, but there was smoke coming from the chimney. David and I approached the cabin cautiously. We peered inside the window, but we couldn't see anything. We tried the door, but it was locked. We were about to walk away when I heard a noise inside the cabin. It sounded like someone was moving around. David and I looked at each other, our eyes wide with fear, We didn't know what to do. Suddenly, the door to the cabin opened and a figure stepped out. The figure was tall and thin, with long, scraggly hair and a beard. Its eyes were glowing red. David screamed and ran away. I followed him, but I couldn't take my eyes off the figure. It just stood there, watching us, its eyes burning into my soul. We ran as fast as we could, but the figure seemed to be gaining on us. I could hear its footsteps getting closer and closer. We finally reached our campsite, and David ran to the tent. I grabbed a flashlight and turned back to face the figure. The figure was still there, standing at the edge of the clearing. It raised its hand and pointed at me. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, and I fell to the ground. I looked up and saw the figure running towards me. I closed my eyes and waited for the end. When I opened my eyes, I was back at the campsite. David was kneeling over me, his face filled with worry. "Are you okay?" he asked. I nodded. "I think so," I said. "What happened?" David told me that he had seen the figure too. He said that it had chased us out of the clearing and then disappeared into the woods. We didn't know what to make of what had happened. We decided to pack up our things and leave the forest as soon as possible. We drove back to town in silence. We were both shaken up by what had happened. We never went camping in Gifford Pinchot National Forest again. A few weeks later, Dave and I were talking about what had happened at the cabin. We couldn't believe that we had seen something so terrifying. "I still don't know what it was," I said. "But I know it was something evil." "Agreed," David said. "I've never been so scared in my life." We decided to do some research on Gifford Pinchot National Forest. We wanted to see if anyone else had ever had a similar experience. We found a few stories online about people who had seen strange things in the forest. One story was about a group of hikers who had seen a figure lurking in the shadows. Another story was about a couple who had heard strange noises coming from the woods. David and I were starting to think that we weren't the only ones who had seen something strange in Gifford Pinchot National Forest. We decided to go back to the forest, hoping to find some answers. We drove to the spot where we had seen the cabin, but the cabin was gone. In its place was a large tree stump. The stump was charred and blackened, as if it had been struck by lightning. David and I looked at each other, our eyes filled with fear. We knew that we had seen something that we weren't. The woods surrounding our home always held an air of mystery, but my son, Ethan, had a penchant for exploring its depths. One summer afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he returned home, clutching an old, tarnished necklace in his small hand. He said he found it near an ancient oak tree. Hidden beneath a pile of moss, the necklace was an unusual find, with a pendant fashioned like a twisted, gnarled root. Its engravings were indecipherable, but it emitted an eerie glow when touched by the fading light. I thought little of it at first, chalking it up to a curious trinket, but soon, strange things began to unfold. As days passed, Ethan's behavior became increasingly peculiar. He would spend long hours gazing out into the woods, his eyes locked on something unseen. His once vibrant laughter turned to hushed whispers, and he began isolating himself from his friends, and even our family. Late at night, I would hear him talking in hushed tones, as if having conversations with an invisible presence. When I asked him about it, he would brush off my concerns, claiming he was talking to a new friend he met in the woods. But I knew something was amiss. Ethan's appearance changed as well. Dark circles etched under his eyes, and he seemed more distant with each passing day. He became fixated on the necklace, refusing to take it off even when going to bed. One night, as I peered into his room through a slightly ajar door, I saw him holding the necklace close to his heart, his eyes glowing with an unnatural luminescence. It was as if the pendant held some sinister power over him. slowly draining away his innocence. I decided it was time to intervene. I tried to gently pry the necklace from his grasp, but he clung to it tightly, his grip unnaturally strong for a child his age. He glared at me with an intensity I had never seen before, and a voice, distant yet hauntingly familiar, spoke from his lips. "Leave me alone," the voice hissed, sending shivers down my spine. "He is mine now." My heart raced as I realized that something had taken residence within my son, using the necklace as a conduit to exert its influence. I knew I had to break whatever cursed hold it had on him. Desperate to save Ethan, I sought help from a local historian who specialized in occult artifacts. As we examined the necklace, he revealed its true nature, a relic infused with dark magic, bound to a malevolent spirit that preyed on the innocent. Together, we devised a plan to confront the malevolent presence residing within Ethan. Armed with ancient incantations and protective charms, we ventured into the woods where the malevolent spirit held sway. As we reached the ancient oak tree, I could feel the malevolence in the air, the atmosphere thick with dark energy. Ethan stood before us, his eyes now entirely consumed by the spirit within, a mere vessel for its sinister desires. With every ounce of strength, we recited the incantations and invoked the power of the protective charms. The woods echoed with eerie sounds, and the ground trembled beneath us. The malevolent spirit fought to maintain its grip on Ethan, but the enchantments proved too powerful. Finally, the spirit was expelled from my son's body, fleeing back to the necklace it had called home for so long. As it dissipated, the necklace crumbled to dust, severing its connection to the world. Exhausted, but relieved, we carried Ethan home. The burden he had carried for so long was finally lifted, and his eyes began to regain their familiar sparkle. Though the nightmare was over, the memory of those haunting days lingered, a stark reminder of the darkness that could befall even the most innocent. We buried the remnants of the necklace deep within the woods, hoping that it would never trouble anyone again. But as I watched my son play, I couldn't help but wonder if some remnants of that malevolence still lingered, hidden within the shadows of the woods, waiting for another unsuspecting soul to stumble upon its cursed domain.